So let me tell you something. There are two very different ways to use Claude, and most people have only discovered one of them. The first way, the one you probably already know, is the chat model. You open Claude.ai, you type a message, Claude responds. It's a conversation. It's brilliant for drafting emails, answering questions, brainstorming, explaining concepts, writing code snippets, and for a lot of tasks, it is genuinely all you need. I love the chat. I use it every single day. But then there's the second way. And this is what we are talking about today, Claude Code. And more specifically, how to actually use it in a way that makes sense for real humans who are not software engineers, who are not terminal wizards, who just want to get more done with AI than a chat window allows. Because here's the thing nobody really explains clearly. Claude Code is not just a faster chat. So let's start with the most fundamental question. What is the actual difference between Claude as a chat model and Claude Code? When you use Claude in the chat window, every conversation starts fresh. Claude has no idea who you are, what you're building, what your files look like, or what decisions you made last week. You can give it context by pasting things in, and Claude is smart enough to work with what you give it. But the key word there is that you are giving it context. You are doing that work manually, every time. Claude Code flips that entirely. Instead of you carrying context to Claude, Claude Code comes to your context. It connects to a project, a real folder on your computer with real files in it, and it reads that project before it does anything. It does not wait for you to explain your file structure. It goes and looks. It does not need you to paste in the code that's broken. It finds the code. It reads it. It already knows what's there. And beyond just reading, Claude Code can take action. It can edit files directly. It can run commands. It can manage your Git history. It can run your tests and check whether something it just wrote actually works. It is not generating text for you to copy. It is working. That is the core difference. Chat model talks with you. Claude Code works with you. Now, the good news for anyone who has been nervous about this, you do not have to live in the terminal to use Claude Code. Yes, it exists as a command line tool, but there is also a full web app at Claude.ai code, and it shares the same sessions, the same capabilities, the same everything as the terminal version. You can start a session in the web app and pick it up later on your phone. So if the terminal has felt like a barrier, I need you to let that go right now because it is not required. What is required is understanding how projects work because the project is where Claude Code's power actually lives. Let's talk about starting a project. When you work with Claude Code, you are working inside a project directory. Think of this as a dedicated folder, a workspace that Claude Code treats as its home base. Everything it reads, everything it edits, everything it creates lives within that project. Now, if you are a developer, this is your code repository, your Next.js app, your Python scripts, your API, whatever you're building. Claude Code drops into that folder and immediately starts to understand the shape of your project by reading its files. But, and this is really important for people who are using Claude Code for non-development work, a project does not have to be a software project. I want you to hear that. A project can be a content system, a client folder, a business workflow, a marketing campaign structure with brief documents and copy drafts and research files. If you have a folder with files in it that relate to a thing you are working on, Claude Code can work inside that folder and actually read those files instead of you having to paste them into a chat. So when you are starting a project with Claude Code, the first thing to think about is what is the folder? What files live there? What is the overall goal of this work? Because that folder is the canvas, and Claude Code is going to read the whole canvas before it picks up a brush. Once you have your folder, the first command worth knowing is init. You type that, and Claude Code analyzes your project structure and auto-generates a starter file for you, a file that becomes the brain of your entire project. And that file is called Claude.md. Let's talk about Claude.md because this is the thing that separates people who get frustrating results from Claude Code from people who get extraordinary ones. Claude.md is a plain text file that sits in the root of your project folder. Every single time you start a Claude Code session in that project, the very first thing Claude does is read that file. Before it does anything else, before it looks at any of your other files, it reads Claude.md. Think about what that means. You get to write a briefing document, a real briefing document that Claude reads at the start of every session without you having to type it out every time. You are not re-explaining your project from scratch on every conversation. You write it once, you keep it updated, and Claude Code knows. What goes in a Claude.md? I'm going to give you the sections that actually matter. First, a project overview. 2 to 3 sentences. What is this project? What does it do? Who is it for? Claude cannot infer your business intent from your file names. You have to tell it. Second, your tech stack or your tools. If it's a website, what framework? If it's a content operation, what tools and platforms you use? If it's a business workflow, what software you're working with? Whatever Claude needs to know about the environment it's operating in. Third, your coding standards or your work standards. This is where you put your rules.
Never use dashes in copy. Always use TypeScript. This project is in dark mode only. The brand color is cyan and navy. Commit messages should always follow this format. You write those rules here and Claude Code follows them automatically every session without being reminded. Fourth, your commands. If your project has specific commands that need to be run, how to build it, how to test it, how to start the development server, you put those here so Claude can run them without asking. And fifth, this is my favorite one. Your decisions, the architectural decisions, the strategic decisions, the things you chose and why. Because Claude cannot read your mind. If you switched from one database to another last month, if you decided to scrap a certain approach, if you have a reason for something being the way it is, you put it in Claude.md and Claude Code respects it instead of second guessing it. Anthropic's official guidance says to keep it short and human readable, not hundreds of lines.
Think of it as a one-page briefing, not a novel. And here's the move that most people miss. When Claude Code gets something wrong, uses the wrong pattern, breaks a convention, does something you didn't want, don't just fix it and move on. Tell Claude to update Claude.md with the correct rule so it doesn't happen again. You are training your project's memory in real time. True story. I've seen people use Claude.md in client project folders where the entire brand voice, the color system, the copywriting rules, the audience profile, and the approved messaging were all in that one file. And Claude Code worked in that folder, producing on-brand, on-voice, on-spec output every single session. That is not magic. That is context. That is Claude.md doing its job. Okay, so now let's talk about what Claude Code is actually for, because I want to give you a real list, not it helps you code.
Excited. A real concrete list of use cases so you can start matching capabilities to your actual work. Writing and editing entire files directly, not generating text for you to paste. Opening the file, making the change, saving it. If you have a website and you want to update copy across 15 pages, Claude Code can do that across all 15 files in one session. Building features from scratch. You describe what you want, and Claude Code writes the code, creates the files, wires them together, not a snippet, the whole thing. Debugging. You tell it something is broken, it reads the relevant files, finds the issue, explains what's wrong, and fixes it. You don't have to paste the error. You don't have to paste the file. It goes and finds them. Refactoring. Cleaning up old code, renaming things consistently across a whole project, restructuring how files are organized. This is tedious and error-prone to do manually. Claude Code handles it systematically. Running tests and checking its own work. This one is genuinely different from anything a chat window can do.
Claude Code can run your test suite, see which tests fail, understand why, fix the code, and rerun until things pass. The feedback loop happens inside the tool instead of inside your head. Writing documentation. Reading your code and generating accurate documentation for it. Not guessing. Reading the actual implementation and describing what it does. Managing Git. Creating branches, writing commit messages, staging changes, reviewing diffs before committing. If you've avoided version control because it felt complicated, Claude Code makes it conversational. Content operations. Generating copy inside actual project files. Maintaining a content calendar folder. Updating a JSON data file that feeds a website. Processing a CSV. Anything that involves reading from and writing to files in a structured way. Research and synthesis inside a project.
If you have a research folder with a bunch of documents, Claude Code can read all of them and produce a synthesis, a brief, a summary, and write it as a new file in your project. Automation scripting, writing scripts that do repetitive tasks, renaming files in bulk, transforming data, generating reports. You describe the task in plain English, and Claude Code writes the script and can even run it for you. Email drafting inside a project context. If your project folder has client background files, past communications, brand voice guidelines, Claude Code reads all of that before drafting, which means the output already knows who the client is, what your tone is, and what has already been said. Building entire landing pages. You give Claude Code a design brief, your brand file, your copy direction, all in the project, and it builds the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in one session. Data analysis.
You drop a spreadsheet into your project folder and ask Claude Code to analyze it, find patterns, generate a summary, and produce a visualization. It reads the file directly. That is not a complete list. That is a starter list. And what all of those use cases have in common is that they involve working on things that exist in files. And Claude Code is the tool that actually touches those files instead of just talking about them. Now I want to talk about something that I think is genuinely underused and incredibly powerful. Using a regular Claude chat conversation to plan before you ever go into Claude Code. Here's the concept. Before you open Claude Code and start a big project or a complex task, you have a planning conversation in the regular chat window. You describe what you want to build. You work through the architecture. You figure out the approach. You ask Claude to poke holes in your plan.
And then, when you have a clear, refined plan that you actually believe in, you bring that plan into Claude Code as the starting context. Why does this matter? Because Claude Code is an agent that takes action. It edits files, it runs commands, it makes changes. And if you go into Claude Code with a vague prompt, you will get a vague result. But if you go in with a clear plan, a plan that you already stress tested in a chat conversation, Claude Code has something solid to execute against. The reverse engineering move is this. You take a complex thing you want to build and you use the chat model to reverse engineer it into a step-by-step plan. You might say, here is what I want to end up with. Walk me through how you would approach building this, what files would be involved, what decisions need to be made up front, and what the right order of operations is. Chat Claude thinks through the whole thing with you. You refine it, you push back, you adjust.
And then you copy that plan into Claude Code and say, execute this. That workflow, chat for thinking, Claude Code for doing, is honestly one of the most effective ways to work with these tools together. You are using each one for what it is actually best at. The chat model is an incredible thinking partner. Claude Code is an incredible executor. You use them in sequence. Now let's talk about plan mode inside Claude Code itself, because this is one of the features that changes how you work with the tool once you understand it. Plan mode is a setting inside Claude Code that separates thinking from doing. When you turn on plan mode, Claude Code will read your files, analyze your request, think through the approach, and produce a plan. But it will not touch anything. It will not edit a single file. It will not run a single command. It just thinks and plans and shows you what it intends to do.
You turn on plan mode by pressing Shift plus Tab twice in the terminal or with the chat plan command. And what you get back is a structured breakdown. Here is what I am going to do. Here are the files I am going to touch. Here is the order of operations. Here are the decisions I am making. And now, this is the important part. You review that plan before anything happens. You can ask Claude to change the approach. You can tell it to remove steps you don't want. You can ask it to explain a decision. And only when you say, okay, go ahead, does it start actually executing. For anyone who has ever had an AI make a change and then thought, wait, that wasn't what I meant? Plan mode is the answer to that problem. It gives you a checkpoint. It gives you visibility. It puts you in control of what happens before it happens. Then when you are ready to execute, you press Shift plus Tab again to exit plan mode and Claude Code goes to work.
Now let's talk about models and thinking levels, because this is where Claude Code gets genuinely sophisticated, and understanding it saves you both money and frustration. Claude Code runs on different models, and you can choose which one is active. The main ones to know right now are Sonnet and Opus. Sonnet is fast, efficient, and capable. It handles the vast majority of everyday Claude Code tasks beautifully. Writing code, editing files, answering questions about your project, running routine tasks. It is the default for most people, and it is genuinely good. Opus is the deep thinker. It is slower, and it uses more of your token budget, but it reasons at a fundamentally different level on complex problems. multi-file architectural decisions, tricky bugs that require understanding the whole system, tasks where you need Claude to really sit with a problem before it acts. Opus is what you reach for when the task is genuinely hard.
And here is one of my favorite things about Claude Code right now. There is a model setting called Opus Plan Mode, or Opus Plan. What it does is brilliant. When you are in plan mode, it uses Opus, the deep thinker, to work through the problem, analyze the code base, and build the plan. Then when you approve the plan and it is time to execute, it automatically switches to Sonnet for the actual implementation work. You get Opus level reasoning on the thinking phase and Sonnet level efficiency on the doing phase, best of both worlds. And you extend how far your session goes before hitting usage limits. You can set this with Model Opus Plan inside a session. Beyond model choice, Claude Code also has effort levels. Think of these as thinking budget settings. On Opus and on Sonnet 4.6, you can set how hard Claude thinks on each step. Lower effort is faster and cheaper for straightforward tasks. Higher effort unlocks deeper reasoning for complex ones.
And if you want Claude to go extra deep on one specific turn without changing your overall setting, you can just include the word Ultrathink anywhere in your prompt, and it will kick into a deeper reasoning mode for that response specifically. These settings sound technical, but the practical translation is simple. For routine work, use Sonnet. For hard problems, use Opus or enable Opus Plan Mode. When you need to go really deep on one specific question or decision, say Ultrathink and let it work. So let me bring all of this together into a real workflow for someone who is new to Claude Code and wants to start using it intelligently. Step 1. Define your project. Create a folder. Put your relevant files in it. If you are building something, this is your project directory. If you are managing a content operation, this is your content folder. The folder is the workspace. Step 2.
Start a Claude chat conversation, the regular kind, and talk through what you want to accomplish. Use Claude as a thinking partner to plan the work, stress test the approach, figure out the architecture. Get to a clear, solid plan before you open Claude Code. Step 3. Open Claude Code in your project directory. Run chat init to generate your starter Claude.md. Then customize that Claude.md with your project overview, your stack, your rules, your standards. This is the work that pays off in every session from here on. Step 4. Bring your plan from the chat conversation into Claude Code as your starting prompt. Turn on plan mode so Claude reads everything and shows you its approach before it acts. Review the plan, refine it, then approve it. Step 5. Let Claude Code execute. Watch it work. Watch it actually touch your files and make real changes instead of generating text for you to copy-paste. And step 6, update your Claude.md as you go.
Every time you make a decision, every time Claude gets something wrong and you correct it, every time you add a new rule or change a standard, put it in Claude.md so the next session starts smarter than the last. That is the system. Chat for thinking, Claude Code for doing. Claude.md as the memory that makes both sessions better over time. Plan mode as the checkpoint before execution. Model selection as the dial between speed and depth. The difference between someone who uses a chat window and someone who uses Claude Code is not that one is a developer and one isn't. The difference is that one has Claude talking to them and one has Claude working with them. The files get touched. The tasks get done. The project moves forward. If you've been curious about this and you've been waiting for a reason to actually try it, this is your reason. Go to claude.ai/code. Start a project. Make a claude.md. Have the conversation.
See what happens when AI stops being something you talk to and starts being something that actually works on your stuff. You are going to feel the difference immediately, 100%. Drop in the comments. What is the first project you want to bring Claude Code into? I read everything, truthfully, and I'll see you in the next one.